But the States might do that. You know, there's danger. There's danger. I was back in South Carolina, though, when the message came. It came from John Adams. John Adams had known that when Citizen Genet came into Charleston talking to us about France and how we ought to love France, I had been very cordial. I believed in the French Revolution because it sounded to me like the French weren't having a king. They chopped off the king's head. Now, that's going a little bit far, but they were anti-king, and that was good. And so I was in favor of the French Republicans. And he came over, and I entertained him, had him for dinner in this very house. Had him for dinner in this very, invited the best people I knew. All of us aristocrats, you know. We're the people who ought to run the country, aristocrats. Not the riffraff, aristocrats. And so I had a good name with the French. But things had gone from bad to worse. John Adams was having a lot of trouble with the French. And so he tapped me to be the minister to France. Now, wasn't that nice, the way they recognized the Pinckneys? His Tom had been a minister to England and a minister to Spain, and now I'm minister to France. Tom has been a candidate for vice president, and I jump ahead of myself, in 1804, I'm the candidate for president. In both 1804 and in 1800, I'm the candidate for president. The Pinckneys are doing all right for themselves. The nation is doing itself a favor by recognizing us as real Pinckneys. That we are real, honest people who are motivated by principle. So I went to France, took my wife, my second wife, first wife had died. Her name was Mary Stead. She and I had no children. Mary had sort of fragile health. And Mary didn't know how to make herself well. When Mary would get to feeling bad, I would say, Mary, let's go for a walk. Get some good air in your lungs. Oh, I can't go, I can't move. And so I would say, Mary, let's do this. No, I can't do it. And so she wasted away. And because she never went anywhere, never met anybody, except hearing gossip from time to time, she got so she despised the French. But I was trying to deal with the French. Well, the first man I had to deal with is named Delacroix, and he refused to accept my credentials as a minister from the United States. He didn't recognize the United States. He's supposed to, but in person he didn't recognize them. He kept me waiting as much as 5 weeks before he would even speak. And then, when finally the recognition was to come, they sent 3 representatives. And these 3 representatives said, we'll be glad to talk with you if, and they listed 5 things that the United States had to do before we'd even have the possibility of speaking to the diplomats in France. First thing we had to do is apologize for a statement that John Adams had made. And I said, I'll be glad to rearrange that and rephrase that. If it's just a matter of semantics, I can handle it. But they wanted this and a this and a this, and 2 things. One, they said that the United States needed to give a loan to France. A loan to France. And they kept saying how the French had helped us win our independence in the Revolution. They kept saying to me, there were more Frenchmen at Yorktown than there were Americans at Yorktown. The French had won your independence. And I kept saying to them, look, our independence in this instance was secondary. You're fighting the British. And you're capturing Cornwallis and glad to have him. And so you're gaining your wartime goals. Well, they didn't hear that. And the second thing, they wanted a douceur. Well, I looked it up in the French dictionary, and it's not in the French dictionary. I didn't know what it was, but as we talked about it, it turns out that it was a bribe. $1,200,000 in order to speak to our counterparts in the diplomatic corps of France. And that's when I said, not a sixpence. As a matter of fact, that's what I said. not a sixpence. Later we came back to America and people embellished it a little bit. And, you know, people ask me, why didn't I correct them? You know, they say, no, not a sixpence, or something like millions for defense, but not 1 cent for tribute. And I said to them, look, not a sixpence is the heart of the matter. That's the message I sent, and that's the message that they got, and there's no reason to foul that up anymore. I said that. By that time, I had 2 assistants to help me do that. One of them was John Marshall, good Federalist, liked John Marshall. He and I stood shoulder to shoulder. And then we both Federalists. Then one of those Republicans came, Elbridge Gerry. He thought he was better than the 2 of us. He thought he could talk sense to the French when we couldn't. And we had trouble staying together. In fact, maybe the toughest struggle in this whole thing was keeping the 3 of us together. You know, the problem is not that the French are unspeakably irresponsible. It's that they're trying to drive a wedge into the American representation. Well, there was a sweet little lady who came from the French, talked to John Marshall. John really liked this young lady, and instead of attending some of our meetings, he and that lady slipped off together from time to time. I didn't say anything about it at the time, because I think she also made advances to Elbridge Gerry. When I said not a sixpence, we broke up. Just before I left, I had a visit from a man that I knew. His name is Beaumarchais. He's a playwright. He had written a play called The Marriage of Figaro. It was a play. No music. It was a play. And the other one that he wrote is The Barber of Seville. And he had helped us during the Revolution by helping funnel money and supplies to the Americans. And so he came as a friend of the Americans, was really trying to tell us, go on and make the deal. Go on and pay the bribe. That's the way we do it in France. And of course we turned him down. Finally, John Marshall and I gave up, and we made plans to come home. Elbridge Gerry, he thought he could handle things, so he stayed. As a matter of fact, he had to leave France. We got thrown out of France, so he lived in Switzerland for a while, thinking that maybe he could heal the breach that the others of us couldn't do. Well, John Marshall caught a ship and came directly back. I went through Bordeaux, that's where my ship was going to be, and I was going to take the Garonne down to Brest, and from Brest back. And I had to wait about 3 weeks to get a ship. So John Marshall arrived in America first with the news. Had a big parade in New York. People came out to meet his ship, cheering him on. Anti-French feeling, severe anti-French feeling. I came, but of course I eventually came to Charleston, and I came about 3 weeks or maybe 2 months later, and a mob met me at the wharf in Charleston. And they played a new piece of music called General Pinckney's March. Big brass band played it. And, you know, I felt like this is the best ever. That's why I was nominated for president for the Federalists in 1800. But in 1800, my cousin Charlie, the man that I helped, Blackguard Charlie we call him, he poisoned the people in South Carolina. He voted for Jefferson. He even told lies about me in the campaign. That's standard procedure, telling lies. But I didn't think a Pinckney could do something like that, particularly to another Pinckney. But Blackguard Charlie, charming man personally, snake in the grass. And so South Carolina lost the election of 1800. We sent our electoral votes up there, and we voted for Thomas Jefferson. And as you remember, it was called a tie between Jefferson and Burr, and he threw it in the House of Representatives. and Charlie was a congressman, and so they voted up there, and they voted for Jefferson. I ran for president the next year, presidential year, 1804. But I represented the Federalist Party, and the Federalist Party was collapsing. It was the last time I ever ran for anything, 1804. Well, you know, it's sort of time for me to quit. I'm past 50 in those days. And now, as I told you, I'm over 80. For the last 25 years, I've lived here in this house, and I lived for a while down in Pinckney Island. My wife didn't like it over there in Pinckney Island, and so finally we had to give it up. And she and my widowed child, the three of us came back, and we lived here. And I've done what I think a Pinckney ought to do. I've been a sponsor of the museum, of the literary society. I have been a leader in developing all sorts of social movements in Charleston. I've been the president of the Jockey Club. Well, I didn't ride and I didn't shoot, but most of the other people didn't either. That's just a high-class social club. It's a social club for aristocrats. I've been the president every year of the Jockey Club. And I found other leadership places, particularly the church. I've been the president of the South Carolina Bible Society. We distribute Bibles everywhere. I thought we ought to give Bibles to the slaves. They got souls. They need to have the education to read the Bible. And that inflamed a lot of people. Even the Pinckneys got under attack for trying to educate the blacks. But I thought that was necessary. Just like in the other days during the war, you know, I'm an Episcopalian. The Pinckneys have belonged down there to St. Philip's Church for years. Me too. And when it came time to decide whether or not we ought to keep the established religion, I voted no. It's time to forget the established tradition. We've got other people in here, in this country, who are not Anglicans. And when the Anglican Church almost collapsed at the end of the Revolution, or during the Revolution, I didn't rejoice over that, but I felt justified. Another one of my friends, and I see him regularly, saw him last week. He's a wonderful man. His name is Richard Furman, the best Baptist preacher in all of South Carolina. He and I used to enjoy. He would come and I would sit right there in that chair, and he'd sit next to me, and we could tell stories. And I made it a tradition every year to send him a case of good Madeira wine. He loved it for breakfast every morning. Me too. We started our day with a glass of Madeira. Some of it marked M. That means it's 5 years old. Some of it marked M5. That means it's 10 years old. But my wine cellar was always full. And you know, I liked being generous. I gave a lot of money individually to people. One thing I also enjoyed was that I joined the Society of the Cincinnati. The people eligible to be in the Cincinnati Society were veterans of the Revolution, officers of the Revolution, not soldiers, officers of the Revolution. And we had said that it would be an inherited membership. A lot of people objected to that. It sounded like a nobility based on military experience. And we had fought against the military. You know, we don't have barons and dukes and lords and earls and things like that. But I didn't see the Society of Cincinnati like that. I saw it as something that celebrated the victories that brought us freedom in America. And that maybe we could make the Society of the Cincinnati like us Pinckneys. And that is that we are the kind of people that Republicans can put their faith in to protect this treasure we have got that we call an American Republic. Most people in the world back in 1776 and 1787 thought the Republic wouldn't work. Well, sometimes it's ramshackle, and sometimes it needs oil, but so far at least, it's worked. And I'm now 80, so I'm not going to be around much anymore to see if it's going to last much longer. You're not 80 yet. And so, and people like Francis Marion and Henry Lawrence and John Rutledge and George Washington and even Thomas Jefferson are counting on you. Let's see if you can measure up. Goodbye. God bless. You have to do this. If you've got a question you think I can answer, ask it. Charles Stukes Pinckney did not have a first-class mind. In many ways, he's a tradition. You know, he's an Episcopalian until he died. By the way, he didn't go to St. Philip's. What's the other church downtown in Charleston?
St. Michael.
St. Michael. That's where he's buried, by the way. He's buried right outside St. Michael. But you know, he would like for the world of 1825, I see he died, to be like the world of 1780. It's like some of us today get upset about the iPods and all those things like that go over our head, and we wish we could go back to the time when you had an adding machine, maybe a typewriter will do. You don't have to have a computer. He felt like that, I think. But the main thing about it, he was proudest of the fact that he thought he was principled. Now, he kept his slaves because he didn't see that as a moral question. He saw that as a society question. This is our society. We have to have it like this. And he could not envision the South without slaves. And, you know, John C. Calhoun thought the same thing. That we couldn't have a South unless we had slaves. It's the keystone. Maybe